Hello, and welcome to this edition of EMS Spotlight. This is a program where we speak to EMS executives about their companies and the industry in which they operate. And our guest on this episode is Vaishnavi Chandra. She is the Chief of Staff for Indic EMS Electronics. Indic EMS is an EMS you probably have noticed on our site, and one that I had the opportunity to visit in India during my tour earlier this year. While Vaishnavi was there, I did not have the opportunity to interview her while I was at their site, but so I'm glad for the opportunity now. Vaishnavi, welcome. Thanks for taking time to speak with me.
Eric, that was a very kind introduction. Thank you so much for it. Hello to you and to all of the EMS Now viewers.
Thank you. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about the trend about expats returning and specifically within the India EMS. And just to put some context on it for the viewers too, I think it's an interesting dynamic that's played out and was that I noticed during my tour in India. And expats, of course, are people who live in a country other than their native country, generally speaking. And there's been a trend over many decades whereby students from a particular country leave their home country, go to a different country, usually in the United States or Europe, go to the university. Upon graduation, they enter business in that country, develop skills, and also develop critical kind of networks within the industry. And after a period of time, they go home, right? And they go back to their home country and help develop the local industry there. Many of them become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses as well. And I think we've seen this over the decades in students returning to countries like Taiwan, South Korea, China. It's happening in Vietnam as well. And now it's happening in India, right? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about because we discussed this a bit, and I think it's a fascinating trend that doesn't get a lot of attention. So let me bring you in. Talk to me about what you're seeing with the return of these expats within the industry in India.
Firstly, I think with all of the countries that you mentioned and with India, the one thing that I would find in common is that education as a culture is quite heavily focused upon. And
Mhm.
now, for the longest time, with most of these countries, you will see this sort of brain drain effect where a lot of the top talent is essentially relocating, going to the States, going to Europe, going to UK, getting an education, and then investing their skill set into that economy.
Yeah.
But like you said, Eric, that pattern of eventually the home economy growing strong enough to re-attract this talent back to the country and then building that cross exposure of skill, international cross exposure of skill,
Mhm.
to kind of bring that skill set and talent back home. That, like you said, with a lot of these other Southeast Asian countries, including India now,
Yeah.
is I think personally for me a great trend to see unfold, especially because I've been a part of this myself.
Mhm.
Went to the UK to do my master's. I had some hopes of settling down in the economy, but very quickly realized the appeal of coming back to India, to kind of invest that same skill set back into my country. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
so kind of help shape an industry that already has established systems but is on the precipice of really scaling up. And that
Yeah.
is electronics, of course, for India, right? So I think that's like a quick opening bit on the topic that we're about to discuss.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I think that's great insight. And so, and I like how you personalize it for yourself there. So what is it, speaking from your own perspective then, so you're in the, what was it that attracted you back? Were there, some of it's probably the appeal of your home country, but I'd imagine there may also be some obstacles in functioning or barriers, whatever the right term is, in other countries, right?
Mhm. So I think it was more to do with the fact that when you're in a lot of these more mature ecosystems, forgive me for using the word, but developed countries, as you know,
Yeah.
is the label
Yeah.
term, we find that you're able to create efficiency, and that's how you can bring in good impact. But when you look at, say, electronics in India, or where IT was, say, 20
Mhm.
years ago, there's more of a transformation kind of role at play. And what I believe is that there are these systems already in our own industry, but now with the entire world looking towards another China plus one manufacturing alternative, India being positioned to be that way, there's this beautiful opportunity to scale things up. So, somewhere when you've developed these skill sets that you know you've invested a lot of time, money, and effort into, you want to be able to contribute to higher tangible impact, right? So, for me personally, and I think I can say this for a lot of my colleagues who are also expats, we have our head of NPI from Flextronics, and then we have our head of test engineering from Honeywell in the US,
Mhm.
the previous one from Malaysia. So a lot of us have this common discussion that over here we get to contribute to scaling up your systems and not just creating efficiencies in siloed processes. Not to say that one's bad or the other's good, but just to
Yeah.
say that they're different, right? And the thrill of one is very different from the thrill of the other. And
Mhm.
that's something that could be a great driving factor for many of us.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I mean, rather, I like the term instead of being siloed and being, just kind of maintaining existing systems, it's the excitement of engaging and growing and having the responsibility to really ramp up and build something that for the company that you're joining.
Absolutely. And I think it's also the beauty of the end-to-end perspective.
Mm.
If you are a program manager here, believe me, you're going to know more about the production floor than you would have were you in a more
Yeah.
established global MNC in a slightly different, ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I think the end-to-end view gives you a deeper understanding of the industry, of the market, and also of the client's pulse, because we are a service industry at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think that's an added layer to what's the
Yeah.
appeal. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, coming from from another country where it's existing, thing, the idea of building it and creating the systems, right, where you're actually putting in place the procedure based on your experience and your knowledge, you're bringing incredible value into a country that you said at the beginning is really on the precipice of ramping pretty substantially.
Absolutely. And I think what's key to ramping substantially is quicker decision making, right? At the end of it. So now if you are somebody who's a seasoned professional in company X, which is a very mature ecosystem in, let's assume, the Europe, and now you've come back to India where you have these greenfield SMT lines, you have good processes and systems in place, but you are now tasked with scaling that up. And what I like, calling, or rather Forbes magazine did, the burning imperative, where there
Yeah.
are these quick action, high impact tasks, then the biggest accelerator to that is faster decision making.
Yeah.
And considering that, at least for us and a lot of organizations like us, we have direct access to the top line. That
Yeah.
means that now your decisions are made in like days or weeks as opposed to months, which can be more prolonged. And of course, there's that added benefit to your client as well, where we won't have to think too hard or too long before making an investment that enables both of us to grow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think embedded within that dynamic is also the authority to do that, right? It's not just you are really empowered because you're an expert. You come do this, right? Go and create the systems, build the factories, put in place the systems. So I think that would be very appealing to a professional.
absolutely. And I think the only way to be successful at any of that is to first I guess, helm yourself as a leader of cultural shift.
Hmm.
So, especially, and I think I think one of the biggest steps towards making our ecosystem a more a more mature EMS player is by accepting the good and the bad. And I think one thing that we could use as an Indian market is a deeper sense of discipline. Now, that is something that I've noticed is quite heavily or well ingrained in different markets. Take the Japanese, for example. So,
Yes.
a lot of people who've been in those cultures, they come here and we expect them to essentially positively influence this change. And only as a byproduct of that will we really be able to make any sort of impact on changing your systems or processes. And a case in point would be digitalization, right? If I'm unable to empower my production line worker to be more digitally friendly, it doesn't matter how many machines that we invest in. It doesn't matter how state of the art they are or how automation driven, because at the end of the day, he's not buying into it and he's the one who has to run it. So my output is going to remain just as low. So that's just, another example.
Yeah, and as I hear you speaking, I'm just thinking of, within the EMS industry specifically, what India is and what India is developing. It's not just like the low mix, low complexity kind of products. India, and I saw it when I was over there, is very high mix type manufacturing. A lot of that going on. Of course, you have the big factories that are running the 24/7, right? You just pump out cell phones. But there's all of those other sectors, which is really the complex, high mix type manufacturing. And that's exciting, I think, for engineers to be engaged with.
Absolutely. And I think it's a pan market surge. If you look at automotive testing, there's
Hmm.
been a great surge towards EV and like automotive testing in the Indian market. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of companies now depending on the Indian engineering expertise to test and certify these products that are meant to be used in very robust applications.
Hmm.
So that's one, lens of it. And then
Hmm.
there's also the fact that we are a heavily digitally integrated country at this point. We contribute to almost 46% of the world's digital transactions.
Yeah.
So I think it's very cute because you go to a roadside vendor of late and they have a little QR code that they're going to pull out of
Yeah.
the pocket. So it's adorable. And the homeless people have QR codes here.
Hmm.
And at that point, you're really aware of how digitally, I guess, enabled the country's gotten towards. So, in
Hmm.
a large way, India is no longer a low complexity market. Take our own space mission, for example. We were able to do what a lot of other countries were able to do at a fraction of the cost.
Hmm.
So, there is a higher respect for the Indian engineering talent of late. And also, I think a better, more deep sense of trust that people are developing towards it. And I think that's a good place for us to be.
No, it absolutely is. I'm thinking too, again, from an EMS perspective, and you talked about this a bit, the siloed piece versus kind of being the free to do a lot of things.
Mhm.
And I'd imagine a lot of these expats, where they were in the West or wherever they may have been in the countries and companies, were very siloed. They may have been the like doing all the NPI, being really in the supplier quality or wherever that might be where they fit. But professionals want to grow and expand and have more responsibility, right? And I think that, within India, it's allowing that opportunity and attracting them back with this promise of you can come and be influential here, right? I think that's a key point for these why people are going, other than national pride, of course, right? I think there's a lot of that underlying this. But I think that opportunity to really be a full professional and really exercise your skills is so critical.
Absolutely. I think take my role, for example, I don't necessarily come from an electronics background, but since I've been in Indic this past year, my entire exposure has been to the shop floor itself, but of course, managing clients directly and of course, managing a little bit of X, Y, and Z. So that is still a more generalist perspective on what EMS can provide. But if you look at, say, for instance, the industrial engineer in our organization, their scope is now also extended to operational excellence. So while this person came in here with one knowledge bank, assuming to be implementing a certain set of tools or skill sets here, now is suddenly responsible for planning the layout of our entire expansion facility.
Mhm.
So I think there is quite a bit of end-to-end view that people get to
Mhm.
experience. For instance, one of our engineers happens to be an ITI diploma holder who has been in the system about 7 or 8 years now. And as of today, she is one of our DFM experts as well. So that kind of skilling or upskilling that you get to see, or that trajectory, it's quite
Mhm.
unique because you get to see the product life cycle, even so from the conception phase all the way till you kind of deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to touch on too, the other aspect of this is also the networks that are developed by the expats, right? That when they're overseas, they create that. And I'd imagine that really benefits them when, for example, new potential OEM customers come over, right? It's like, they may know them or at least maybe have something in common there, some touch points that contributes credibility as well in the transaction.
I mean, absolutely. If you look at any sort of client-facing role, for most EMS companies, since we're B2B, we're services,
Yeah.
there is a very limited platform in on which you can really get these leads or make connections or network enough to get clients. We
Mm.
met you at one of these places, if I'm not wrong, Electronica.
Yeah.
So there are very limited, spaces where we can do it. And to a large aspect, the entire ecosystem that comes along with this expat when they join our organization or join any EMS organization within the country is an added benefit. Of course, they bring in their clientele, but of course, there's referrals, so there's employees coming in, and more than anything, there's transference of skill and of knowledge across borders. And I think that's another added benefit apart from just the intellectual network that they bring in with them.
Yeah. And Cosenza, you indicated too, I mean, you're on the press, you're really ramping over there. So you're getting a lot of attention. You're getting a lot of visits, I'm assuming, from prospective OEM customers, right, who are coming over and visiting the plants, meeting the people, getting a sense of the supply chain and logistics and everything over there. And that's again, it's not siloed. You have this opportunity to also be kind of an ambassador for the country and the industry with these people that come over.
I think that's extremely true because if you look at what an NPI engineer would typically do in any sort of
Yeah,
non-local ecosystem, they would be limited to the engineering work or
yeah,
building all of the requirements pre-prototype. But if you are in an ecosystem like this, you are now at the center of the attention. You are a part of those conversations that are facing the client, that are kind of convincing the client to be on board. So there is, this concept of you being offshore or behind the scenes to getting in front of the scenes and now kind of understanding directly from the source what it is that the vision of the product or eventually your impact would look like in a scale. Yeah.
yeah. And I would imagine that, well, we'll speak about the career advancement. Do you see that then once people come back and join that they're able to advance a lot quicker than they would have been had they stayed back in the country where they went to school and were working?
I think it's heavily dependent on the role that you're in as well.
Mhm.
But for any young professional, when I say young, I mean, any well below the 40, 50 age, where
Yeah.
that there's a long career curve left. I
Mhm.
think for them, acceleration of their progression path is quite fast in the local markets, or at least in organizations that are far less bureaucratic
Mhm.
simply because you have a larger stage to lead to more deeper, more visible impact. And if you create enough impact, if you cause enough change, then the associated benefit is almost a given with it. So I,
Mhm.
I, I truly believe that paths in general, leadership pipelines, they're wide open when it comes to India. And if you
Yeah.
look at slightly more other ecosystems, you have crowded top lines and lesser room to wriggle about, I could say.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, because, you know, yeah, you see a lot of kind of people, older people who stay in their roles, right? And it inhibits the advancement of the younger engineers. And Lord knows we need a lot of younger engineers in this industry, right? With all the development to stay on top of it and to really advance that industry. So, but the other element that's interesting to me is just the scope of responsibility that becomes available to these people, right? Once they come home you could be managing hundreds of people, right? All of a sudden, you may be going from a very small team based on your expertise. You're coming back and you're giving a lot of, so it's not just the technical piece, it's also the human, the people side of it.
Absolutely. And I think that can be deeply motivating for most
Mhm.
professionals. Um, at the end of the day, at some point in your career, most people do want to transition into leadership roles. So the scale of having a small but strong team as opposed to a slightly larger slightly disorganized, larger team of hundreds of people, it's a
Mm,
completely different experience, right? And I think at the end of the day, it can feel deeply motivating to somebody who is
mm.
intent on being successful at it. And it also kind of reminds you of the responsibility in your hands, right? Because there
Yes.
are these many people that rely on you for their job and
Hmm.
rely on you making the right decisions for them to thrive. So I think that kind of accountability and that motivation,
Yeah.
it brings a really wholesome feeling to any professional. And I think that's something to, get out of bed for every
Yeah.
morning.
And I will say, and I'm glad you said that because that it was one of the dynamics I did note I visited 13 EMS while I was over there, Indic just being one of them. But it was really palpable to me with the executives that I spoke to, this sense of caring and concern for the people and wanting to grow the people. And it's authentic, right? It wasn't just show. You really get a sense that, and even as a visitor and a guest, everybody, you're our guest, and so there's a care and a courtesy that goes along with that, but also just the responsibility that I felt with people, with the executives, when they spoke about their people. It was very noteworthy to me.
I think we are a very warm people, and we love extending that into um, all our facets, I suppose, all facets of our life. That culture kind of seeps across,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I think it's also a large part that there has been a very positive perspective shift in terms of what India is and what India can bring to the table, and
Yeah.
so we welcome that energy as well. So I
Yeah.
think added to that, caring deeply for our people is what results in good quality for our clients.
Yes.
So if they don't feel cared about, they're not going to care about the products that they're building. They're not going to care about the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
So keeping them happy means our business is running well. And to a large part, that's easier said than done, but worth
Yeah.
striving for.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you make a good point about where India is and what they're becoming, right? It's you're still kind of yeah, I've been saying that, I wrote my first market research study on India over 20 years ago. And for 15 years later, a lot of it was still relevant. It's
Mhm.
changed in the last 5, 7 years or whatever, right? I mean, it is truly achieving everything that India had hoped, and I think that a lot of people in the industry hoped that India would become. So you really are kind of defining yourself anew in the current times.
I suppose it's a bit of a makeover. I think I could rather put it as, if you look at pan industry segments, not just EMS, there
Hmm.
has been a surge in a lot of Indian or Indian origin people playing leaders. If you
Yeah.
look at something as like tech, you have Sundar Pichai, you have Parag
Mhm.
Agarwal, and then the far end of the polarity, you have Indra Nooyi from PepsiCo, or my personal favorite, Leena Nair from Chanel, which
Mhm.
is British, truly
Yeah.
British luxury fashion house. So you have this wave of Indian leaders across the world, and then now we finally see that this talent is returning back home as well. So
Yeah.
I think somewhere a lot of that change that you've just mentioned is a large part of re-attracting that talent here. So yes,
Yeah.
it's been a makeover, a long overdue one, if I could say. And I think it's a great time to live in India for the first time in decades. And I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the one that stands out to me as an Indian leader is the head of Flex. The lady who
Yes,
runs Flex, of course, is in now.
absolutely.
She doesn't reside in India anymore. She's over here, but she certainly. Actually, I just saw something earlier today about her recent trip to India to the facilities there and speaking in Chennai that she was at.
Mhm.
So I think there is within our industry a great example of somebody within the Indian heritage who's running
Absolutely.
one of the most respected companies in our industry.
And
So
the largest. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, there's something, and I the ability. I'm going to come back to that before we end. Just that ability to shape and to create the systems, right? That is just. as you said, professionals want to grow and expand and make a difference. And you're not coming in and just getting in, filling a role in a finished system, right? You're really instrumental in growing something substantial.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, um, when you are a part of the transformation, then you were a part of the history. So you can tell it
Yeah,
a few years down the line. I think
yeah,
it's the way it was with IT and software within India. A lot of the people who were there when it happened reminisce about it and speak about it so fondly, including our managing director. You've
yeah.
had a word with him. So yeah, so I think that's the beauty of it right now because India's, we're finally at the stage where global EMS experience, it's had like a disproportionate impact,
Hmm.
but that's why Indian experts are returning because we're not just, catching up. So
Yeah,
somewhere in more mature markets, you're optimizing, but in India, you really get to transform.
yeah,
So that's a large part of the beauty of
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I like the way you say you aren't just catching up, right? You're really it's India is, and there's a great opportunity there to kind of redefine some of how EMS operates, in my mind, right? You really have an impact. This is the way it's been, but we need to evolve this model, and we need to refine it and make it better. And I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of energy within India and within the population we're talking about here to do exactly that, to really make India something special.
Absolutely. I think we have the largest youth population in the world.
Uh,
So
yeah.
just means maybe a few years down the line, we'll have a really young retirement age. But I look forward to it. That's fine.
Now, I think and I've said since I've come back, India is moving very fast. The industry there is moving very fast. Unbelievably professional people, very welcoming people, very open people. At least I found that to be in my interactions with the different companies. And everybody wants India to succeed as well. It's not just about their company alone. It's about the country as a whole, and that national pride still underlies a lot of this.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
good. Before I let you go, is there anything else you want to add or say about what we're talking about, or the EMS industry in India?
I think the EMS industry in India is really growing. This is more witnessed than I can simply state. And
Hmm.
a lot of the global OEMs are now trusting in our capability as a high skill, high complexity market to be able to provide scale. So I think the end note for any expat who's considering returning to India is that you'll be in the right in the middle of all the action and right in the middle of all of the work and the chaos, but the organized chaos that comes with helping scale an industry of this sort. So I think
Hmm.
it's an amazing place to be, and any expat who's watching and wants to return, I think it would be a great idea for them.
Now's the time. And
Yeah.
speaking of chaos, you guys are also building your new facility there, so are very busy with. I got to see it when it was still a shell. I'm sure it's much more advanced today than there, but Indic is growing amazingly fast too, and attracting a lot of attention.
Absolutely. It every day I go into work and it looks like it's grown. That's how quickly they're building it.
Yeah.
We're hoping to open within about 3 to 4 months. So we really look forward to the launch. We will be upping our total SMT capacity to 14 lines now. So that means a lot of free capacity for a lot of new clients and quite a rich pipeline to be able to justify those investments as well. So, yes, I think that a large part of us talking confidently towards the Indian industry is the, I suppose, inflow of conversations we've had at Indic. So
Yeah.
it's really exciting, and we really look forward to launching the facility soon. And I
Yeah.
hope you're there, Eric.
Well, you have to send me an invite, Vaishnavi,
Of
and then
course.
maybe this is it. I have to. No, I would love to. I definitely want to come back to India in 2026. I think it's where the industry, it's the most exciting region for the industry currently. And I'd like to cover that a little more because I think there's a lot of great stories, such as the one you were just indicating. So,
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your perspective and insight on this. This is a fascinating topic to me, and I'm glad, and I think it's very real, and I appreciate your insights and your personal story within that as well. So thank you for that, and hopefully we can talk again next year.
Amazing. It was a pleasure chatting with you, Eric, and have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays to you too.
Bye.
Bye bye.